as with the technology, we'll ask for public comment first. If no one runs to the podium, we'll move to the agenda. The first item has to do with the pilot for the elementary learning support. Mrs. Kaleza, Mr. Ware.
Hello again. I'm Joan Kaleza. Can you hear me? Is this on? I am the STEM supervisor for elementary, and Scott Ware is our special ed supervisor for elementary. And we're here to talk about a proposal we'd like to put forward, which is to pilot an alternative curriculum for students who are receiving math instruction and learning support. So we've kind of prepared a very short presentation, so I'll go through it. Hopefully we'll address most of your questions, and then we'll be happy to take any further questions from you after that. So we're going to look at the proposal itself, the justification for why we're putting it forward, an overview of the program that we're proposing as a replacement, how we're going to evaluate the effectiveness of this pilot, the cost, and then we'll take any questions you might have. So our proposal is to replace at two of our schools, at Grass and at Guth Elementary. Right now, all of our schools are using Saxon Math for students who are getting math instruction in the learning support classroom. And we would like to replace that with Number Worlds, the 2015 edition of Number Worlds. And part of this proposal does include a 3-hour training that will be given to those learning support teachers on June 12th. So the justification for proposing this is, there actually are a few things. The first thing is that we know that now with the Common Core standards in math and the revised PA standards and the PSSA tests in math, that the expectations for what students are expected to know and be able to do has increased dramatically. Saxon Math is not aligned to standards. In addition, the version of Saxon Math that we're using is relatively old, so it precedes when standards have been revised. And what we're finding is that it's becoming more difficult for students to transition back to regular education classroom, especially now that we've implemented Everyday Math 4 district-wide, which already has increased the level of rigor and expectation for students. So now that we have that increased level for our regular education students, we have a disconnect between the expectations for our learning support students. So the reason we're choosing Number Worlds 2015 edition to pilot is because it's very closely aligned to Everyday Math 4. It follows it very much in the way lessons are structured, where there's a focus to a lesson, there's coherence, there's spiraling of standards, and the rigor and the level of engagement is much higher and corresponds very well to what they would be experiencing in the regular education classroom. In addition, the assessments are very similar. So the programs work very well together, and the difference is that Number Worlds will focus on core foundational standards. So it will identify the standards that are really critical for students to be able to possibly gain entrance back into the regular ed classroom. There are formal assessments included in the program. There are placement assessments to determine where students should begin. There are weekly assessments. There's an assessment for every unit. And just like with the Everyday Math 4 program, there are cumulative assessments that are given to make sure that students are retaining and not losing what they've learned in prior units. In addition to the formal assessments, it includes informal assessments. Every lesson has daily checkpoints, which are embedded directly into that lesson. There also are online components, which includes the online assessments and progress monitoring built in. There's teacher and student access to the technology components. There also includes a program called Building Blocks, which is an adaptive program that is based on students' individual learning trajectories. And finally, it encompasses the 21st century skills that we're trying to emphasize with our students, real-world applications, and it also includes project-based learning activities. As far as evaluating the success of the program, what our plan is to look at the data from the fall. So what we're going to be doing is all the students in the regular ed classrooms are going to be taking quarterly benchmarks. So the first benchmark is going to be given probably in around November, end of the first marking period. Then they're going to be taking a benchmark, a cumulative assessment at the end of the second marking period, third and fourth. So we are going to be giving those same curriculum-based assessments to the students who are in the learning support classes, not just the ones that in the pilot, but students that are in the learning support classrooms in the other 4 buildings as well. And we'll be able to look at that data to see if they are making better growth related to the curriculum expectations than the students who are not in the pilot. We also have data through AIMSweb, and we're also going to take a look at the number of students who are able to transition back to the regular education program. As far as the cost, I have some money in my math budget that I was able, that I didn't spend because I was able to purchase a number of manipulatives that were needed for the new Everyday Math 4 program through program improvement proposal. So that freed up some money that I typically spend for math supplies and so on. So we are proposing to purchase no print materials. We have licenses for the 5 teachers that will be teaching those buildings to access all of the instructional materials online. And then we also have, and I really shouldn't say student licenses because they're not student licenses, they're actually licenses per level. The way the program is set up, there are 7 levels, A through G. Levels A, B, and C are geared toward catching kids up. They're more preventative, whereas levels D through G are intervention types of things. So depending on where the student places when they take their placement test, they might be starting at level A, they might be starting at level B, G, or D, or so on. So these are subscriptions, is a better word than licenses. So we're planning to purchase 10 subscriptions for each level at each of the buildings. So that would give us 70 subscriptions at Guth, 70 subscriptions at Grass. And then we would purchase the classroom manipulatives for the teachers. So the total projected cost for the subscriptions and the manipulatives is $3,650. Although we're not purchasing the print materials, we don't think the print materials are necessary because all of the materials that would be available in the print version can just be downloaded right from the online site, which I think is even a better use of the resources. Number one, it's much, much less expensive than purchasing the individual workbooks for each student when they may not even be working in that workbook for very long. So it just seemed to be much more cost effective, and it also allows the teacher to decide strategically which pages in the workbook she wants to have students working in. So that's pretty much a quick overall view of what we're proposing and how we're going to be evaluating the success of the program. And at this time, we'll take any questions you might have.
How long do the licenses last?
This is a 1-year license that we would,
I'm sorry, I filled all of them off. They're blinking.
they all went out.
These are teacher voices to project.
These are just 1-year licenses. If We are to move forward with a program improvement proposal. There is a 6-year license, a 6-year subscription,
And
which
you'll-
is actually a savings of money over purchasing as a single-year license, or subscription, I keep saying license.
And you said it was the 2015
Yes.
edition, so how
Mhm.
many years has this program been?
Number Worlds has been around for many, many years. In fact, it is a research-based program which has been recognized as a program that's suitable for special education. This is just the newest version that's totally aligned to standards now. In fact, our IST teachers are using Number Worlds as kind of a supplement to students who are in IST right now. I shared the new version of the program with them, and they think it's fantastic. So they're very enthusiastic about having it in these buildings for their learning support students.
I think from a special education perspective, the program we're currently using, like Ms. Kaleza said, it's not aligned to what we're doing in the general education classroom. So when our kids are into that classroom, the gap is growing larger. So our goal is to have our kids, have the ability to be back into the general education classroom with their peers. So to have a program that is able to help them close that gap and spend more time in with their peers where they should be.
Let me say first that I will shed no tears for the loss of Saxon math if you actually declare that dead on arrival. It seems to me that it's so rigid, and here you have students where we're trying to differentiate and make the program more accessible, or at least more successful for them individually, that it just didn't seem to be a good fit, frankly. In terms of the grass and booth, how many students would this actually impact?
So we're using our numbers this year and projecting for next year, but based on Scott's numbers, it looks like we'll have 24 students at Grass and 32 at Guth, for a total of about 56.
Actually, that
Mhm.
reminded me of a question. Why, it seems like we do grass a lot for
Oh,
pilots, and do you ever switch it around?
excellent
Not-
question.
I just,
There's a
I
very,
wondered if different populations would give you a different result.
and normally I would do something like that, but next year we have a couple of other pilots running in the other buildings. So there is no pilot running next year at Grass, and there's no pilot being run at Guth next year. So that's why those two buildings were chosen.
And Mr. Smith asked if.
Yes, and one building asked, could we pilot this? They were really looking for something.
I have a question. So you said there were about 50-some students?
56,
But then why do we need 140 student
so
licenses?
that's a great question. The way the subscriptions work, so in fact, Scott asked the same question. And my explanation is, we're not sure where the students are going to place in the program right away, or how quickly they're going to progress from one level to the next. So to make sure that we had adequate subscriptions for students as they were needed, and they're only $12 a subscription for a level per student, we decided to I decided to err on the side of having at least 10. So at the maximum, looking at numbers of students that are in a class, we would have 10 at any one level at a time.
So you're getting 10 at each of the levels?
At each level, yes. So we'll have 10 level A subscriptions, 10 level B subscriptions, 10 level C, and there's 7 levels.
Oh, all right.
And you said that I wasn't sure if this is how I understood it correctly. They take an assessment? And
Yes.
then when you make up the program, you just have them hit the skills that they missed and
Well,
then move on to the next?
There's a placement test. There's actually 2 parts to the placement test. There's a number knowledge test, and then there's the level placement test. And based on, and the way that works is students will start working, and when they hit the wall, that kind of tells the teacher where they're starting on the levels. And then once they're in that level, they can progress depending on how quickly they're able to progress through that. One student might progress very quickly, and then based on all of the weekly tests and the unit tests and the cumulative tests, and then their progress monitoring, they may or may not have to continue completing the entire level. They may be able to move on to the next level.
Any other questions? Are we okay with moving this pilot forward? Okay, yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, the high school social studies. We have Mr. Viverka here tonight to discuss textbook approval and film approval.
Great. Good evening, everyone. I have two approvals that I wanted to ask you for this evening. The first one is no, that's fine. No, that's fine. The first one is for our American Law class. If you remember, we approved this course back in November as a new elective course for 12th grade students. We want to use the Street Law book, A Course in Practical Law, 9th edition, from McGraw-Hill Education. It's actually going to be a purely digital version. So it'll be a one-year student license. We want to do the one-year license. There are multiple year licenses available, but we wanted to go with the one-year license to ensure that this book is really what we want it to be. And so we just want to do kind of a pilot for this first year, make sure it's what we want. We're purchasing 20 copies for this first year. It's actually a semester course. We actually have 40 kids in the class. It'll be 20 for the first semester, and then we'll use those same licenses again the following semester. And then at the end of the year, we'll reevaluate and make sure this is the text that we want. The digital choice is really again it's from Street Law. It's been around for a long time. Street Law Incorporated has partnered with McGraw-Hill to produce this. Very reputable company. They've done a lot with Street Law in the last couple years. They also have, McGraw-Hill has a new system called Networks. So it's not just an online text, it's actually a very interactive features that are also there. So the actual text is there, but then in addition to that, there are videos, there are interactives, there are maps, there are questions students can answer. There's almost like a Canvas-like feature to it where students can actually answer questions and submit it to the teacher on the Networks system. So looking at the network system combined with the Street Law reputation and the background of that, we thought this was definitely the definite choice for our American Law class. Any questions about the textbook?
Are you surprised by the number of students you got, either too low or too high relative to expectations?
I think being a first year that we run this course, I think I'm happy with the fact that we have two sections. I'm also
Any other questions about this?
digital text.
Well, we can access it ourselves.
Right.
I did try to go on and it wanted like a code.
The username and password to put from that, and then it's on page.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even see, I just clicked on the link.
Right. Did it work for you, the digital?
I didn't go there yet, but.
Please let me know if it doesn't, and I can give you access to it and I can show you. Again, it's the actual textbook itself is back ordered until the end of May, so I couldn't show you that anyway. But so the online text is all there plus additional features, so I can definitely show you that if you would like. Okay. My second approval is for a History Through Film course, which is also another senior elective that was approved back in November. And this History Through Film course is very popular. 130 students signed up for the course. There are 5 sections of this course. And we have determined a list of films that we think would be appropriate for the course, moving through some world history as well as most of American history. There's the list of films. Again, as we go through each year, we might add to that list or amend that list, but that's the list that we're going to go with moving into this first year. We won't deviate from this list, and we're not going to show every film, of course. There will be clips of certain films, but we wanted to, of course, have the list approved so we could be free to use these films in the class. In addition to that, there's also a permission form. Because of the mature content of some of these films, of course, the teacher will use his discretion in terms of, how best to show these films. The teacher will use his discretion in terms of how best to show these films, but essentially there will be a parent permission form required for enrollment. So every student that's enrolled in the course will have to have a permission form and will have to return that to us. And so I'll be confirming that all students enrolled in the course will have a permission form that has been signed and returned. And of course, as you can see from the permission form, it also lists just some of the mature content associated with the course and getting approval before students are able to enroll. Are there any questions about?
Are there any of the movies that you plan on showing in their entirety?
I think we're still trying to determine that. I don't know if there's one offhand that I would say it would be an entire film. Once we do go through our curriculum in that, I can be more specific, but I don't believe at this point any of them would be shown in their entirety.
So it's mainly to show like how
Yeah.
historical events are
That's
shown
one
in-
piece of it, how historical events either compare or contrast to actual events, or even looking at perspectives or looking at historical angles that we're going to be looking at the different films. So there's lots of different ways to approach a film. It's not just necessarily going to be the chronological or the historical piece. It can also be, how it was put together, how the film is trying to portray a certain event, and those types of themes that are going to permeate through the course.
Are there any movies here? I mean, I don't know. I know a lot of the movies. I don't know them all. Are there any movies on here that are not made in America, American films? I mean, if you're talking about perspective.
A really good point. There's definitely films that have a historical world view, but I believe they're all American films, yes, at this point, right? I mean, I know. I would have to
Is there
look.
any consideration of
Yes, of course.
showing? And I mean, I don't know. Like, if these are all
Right.
made for the movies, right?
Right.
Entertainment. They're not documentaries,
Right,
per se.
right.
I just,
That's correct. These are your popular films, and again, I think if you think about, even though they're mostly American films here, more and more they're made for a world audience. So I think that a lot of that perspective is embedded within some of what you're going to see here as well. It's not just an American perspective,
right. It just might be
Yeah.
interesting to show, something like if there are
but that's a great
Vietnam
point.
War movies, or what they would call the American War, like
Right,
made in a different country, right?
right. Yeah, it's a really good point, and that would be something to consider as we move along here. Sure.
Numbers that these books are also, these movies are also books, right, taken from books. Do you know if any of them are required reading at any point through the student's career here at Pennridge?
I haven't cross-referenced that
Okay.
list, but I would imagine I can talk with with Hillary, and we can discuss that and see. But I'm sure there are probably some crossover.
Any other
It
questions?
sounds like a great course, so.
I think it's going to be wonderful. And again, this first year we'll kind of tweak it in terms of how we approach it and how the kids react to it. But it's definitely a popular course right now.
Yeah,
I think it'll be a
the
good one.
students will have fun with it.
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, the third item is our high school summer reading selection. Mr. Chiplecki?
This year, our summer reading selection is Animal Farm by George Orwell. Definitely one of the motivations for doing this book is, well, first and foremost, to get away from our genre of the past 2 years, a very noble genre, but, you know, kind of 2 years in a row of someone's perspective and memoirs of facing imminent death. Nonfiction, whereas Animal Farm is completely the opposite of nonfiction. It's an allegory. It is a story told with a great deal of symbolism and told through the eyes and through the voices and the lives of animals on a farm. So it's much different than what we've seen in the past 2 years. It is a shorter read. It's by George Orwell. If you're familiar with 1984, that's up close to 300 pages, if not a little bit more, if you take in the contextual information. Animal Farm is much less than that, and to speak like someone once spoke about of Mice and Men, just when you get to the point where you think it's enough, it ends. So it's about the right length for reaching all students. That's it. And you can read the blurb there I took from Wikipedia, which, as you know, in Wikipedia you can click on any of the pieces there that are links to if you don't know that information in particular. There is a little bit of contextual information that might be helpful to a student going into it, which I will provide, like I did last year with a s'more. I apologize, I'm jumping down the page. At the bottom, one of my points at the bottom was that I included last year's s'more, because I don't think I had that prepared for our meeting last year, for the last lecture. If you click on that, you can see what I'm talking about, lots of contextual information. Certainly, here's a summary, here's some notes, here's some, audio-visual information that you might take advantage of to understand the context of the book. Pretty simple context, although obviously the historical digging into it is complex, but as a concept, it's simple about, a revolution, and then the people who create the revolution, in many cases through history, then become like those they sought to take out. Same thing happened in the French Revolution. They got rid of the aristocracy and became the new aristocracy. In terms of the rationale and merit, like I said, there's a lot of symbolism, but not complex symbolism. Allegory is a great, it's a very critical skill for a student to develop their ability to understand allegory, because allegory takes symbols and then puts them all together and creates another story, kind of at the bottom of the iceberg, so to speak, to draw a metaphor. And then, of course, Orwell's a great writer, so you have a lot of instances of writer's craft, of description, and things like that. There's obviously historical significance coming out of World War II in an age of, where it was pretty much the Axis versus the Allies coming out of World War II, and then the Cold War, which this book is more based on that. In fact, actually more based on the internal workings of then Russia. And then, of course, there's modern implications. The world is still in great unrest in many ways, in many places. So there's certainly some modern implications. And the book is often referenced in academic circles, not just in academic, but political circles. You hear it referenced all the time in political debates and discussions, and just basic reading. If you're reading the news, or you're reading blogs or something like that, they do reference the book in a similar fashion that they reference 1984, the concept of Big Brother and doublespeak and things like that. This book kind of has the same thematic value, but again with less complexity than 1984. Even if a student doesn't necessarily access the allegory right away, they certainly understand the tale of these animals, and these animals are kind of controlling these animals, and they said they were all going to be free together, but now some are a little higher up than others. So I think it's understandable by any reader. And then down the bottom with the additional information, you do have this in front of you, right? Okay, because that'd be really strange if I was referencing something you had no idea what I was talking about. We expect students to read the novel before the start of school, but most likely I'll put teachers will come in and say, okay, we're going to talk about this in a week and a half or 2 weeks, so we give them a little chance to refresh their memories if they need to. We've spoken as a department, and certainly, would engage the social studies department to use the book as a common foundation for some discussion. Obviously, the themes are big enough to pretty much apply to any study of history or most of our studies of literature and things like that. So use it as a foundational piece in the English world for a writing sample, to model how discussions might take place in that class, and then, of course, to start
see how it was used. So I'm just wondering, does every class really do
in some way, shape, or form they do. I'm trying to make sure that we use it initially. Some people waited till later on. They said, it's really going to fit here when we study, whatever the book they know they're coming up on, we're going to use this to kind of get into that mindset. So I've had teachers talking about it into November and December when they were starting something, but not do it much in the beginning. I always invite teachers to use this as a writing sample. It's a ready-made writing sample. And sometimes you can formulate questions where if the student doesn't have a super understanding of the book, they can at least write about something. You get a sense where they're coming from. But we will have that discussion as we move forward, just to make sure there's, if not a shared experience, but at least every student is going to deal with it in some way as they come into their classrooms. And something that's a little more literary based is going to be immediately more relevant in terms of what the teachers know they want to get going on right away. Different than the last lecture on Tuesday's morning. But I believe everybody uses it in some way, some probably more than others.
Okay. And then I share with all students and parents, and I was like, you're going to share that with parents. And so my question is, have you thought about including parents in the reading and having that be a shared experience with the parents?
I'd love to. I can communicate that via SMORE. I can communicate that in other ways. We can put that on the blackboard. Initially, if you remember, when we wanted to do the one book piece, and I don't know if you were around way back when in that other school district up the street when we did one book. I think you were already out by then on that with the twins, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I was there.
I think it was right around then. But anyway, the idea was to engage an entire community in the reading of the book. And I really, at some point, want to get back to that. Unfortunately, what happens in a school district, the engines are kind of cooling down in June and May, and it's hard to go, hey, come on, let's all read this book together. And the first time we did it, we had a couple hundred kids come into the school in the summer, in August, sit down in circles and talk about the book, and then we couldn't get as many adults to come in and so forth and so on. And although it's still valuable because kids are reading it, talking about it, and doing things, it starts to turn into one book, one English department, as opposed to one book, one community or one school. So I agree. I think we'll try to reach out and engage people in this and encourage people to read the book with their children, or both read it separately and then talk about it or something like that.
Right. I just think if you did it and said, there'll be think of some sort of activity that, everybody, people are short on time. So, but you might have an activity, like a day where people could come in the fall, perhaps not in the summer when but in the fall when, people are around. And then at least if they think, oh, maybe I'll go to that, they might read it. If you had some, they might discuss it with their child then. But maybe we could use technology somehow where everybody has a bulletin board where you could leave your thoughts about the book, and at least then people have communicated and I don't know, I just it didn't strike me with the other books, and I had already read both of those. Maybe that's why. I've read this too, but it's been a longer time. I don't know, but I think just because you wrote, this more will be shared with students and parents, it made me think, well, what if we just encourage parents to say,
Oh, I'd love to.
read it,
That'd
and
be-
then, you know, just keep it simple,
fantastic.
something in the fall, some way for people to engage, and it might just get people talking more with their kids.
Yeah, and that's where maybe I can talk to the teachers and think about what they might want. I mean, unfortunately, we don't have the computer, we need the computers to stay here in the summer to get re-imaged and cleaned up and everything else. But most students have some access over the summer in some way, shape, or form, so we could probably create something where at least, you know, to have engage in some sort of a response from, you know, different grade levels, or, you know, have parents respond in some way. And, you know, I think that's a great way to, you know, in fact, this would be year 5 of the one book, so I'm thinking this would be the time probably going into next year to really consider what we're doing, why we're doing it, and make sure this is what's going to best help
And I
us.
can see how people wouldn't necessarily come in over the summer,
Mhm.
you know, but like just read the book, and then in the fall, when people are here, or maybe something at back to school night, when everybody's here.
That's what I was just thinking, back to school night, when people are naturally coming to the building anyway.
Right.
But it could be like 21st century learning night, but for, you know, something, you could use technology too, but could be, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but yeah, you could get people involved that way. Maybe if it was tied to back to school night, it wouldn't seem like another night. Maybe that would get more people to back to school night. I don't know.
Like we'll
you know.
start with a quiz for everybody.
Yeah.
With a
That would be really
That'll
prize,
excite them.
with a prize, and then everybody
Well, right,
would
could
read
it
it.
be like, I was telling my kids, that my fondest
Give you a
memory
free
of
copy.
elementary school was candy for spelling tests. It's a good motivator. I'll read the book.
We'll have the treasure chest
Yes.
for the dentist.
Yeah, you see, you know, some parents get very competitive, they'll wanna,
Oh, yeah. Oh, trivia night.
oh yeah, a trivia night, a trivia
It's
competition.
I'm going to have to engage some of my fellow educators. This sounds like a lot.
Oh, yeah, we'll be there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Trivia on an animal farm. It'd be like reading Olympics.
Reading Olympics for grown-ups.
Oh, my goodness. Reading
Now we're really talking.
Okay.
Good choice.
There's copies here if anybody wants one. So take one and read and let me know.
Any other questions? Do we teach allegory specifically at any point in the English
Oh, yeah.
language? If so,
I
where?
They probably touch on it in middle school, but it is a pretty deep concept. And if you don't get symbolism, you're not going to get allegory. Specifically in freshman year, I know that we get into it when we look at Lord of the Flies. Because Lord of the Flies is the same deal. It's a story about a bunch of kids on an island, but everybody symbolizes something. So there's a whole other story going on underneath, just like an Animal Farm.
Any other questions? Sounds like a very interesting choice to me. Hopefully it will to the students as well.
Good, thanks.
Thank you. Right. The last item on the agenda tonight is Dr. Scheib talking about what constitutes summer school.
Hey, Dr. Yurnaw. This is the time of year where we bring all this information together to share with you. We have an addition this year. If you look down on the list, we have the SY and ESL. Our summer school is still being run by Mr. Vogel. And
Can you
nothing
speak
has-
up, please? I really can't hear you.
Nothing has changed there, and we still will have Camp Invention, the string camp, the summer band camp, and we're adding the musical theater camp, if you remember earlier in the year, when Joyce and Kim came to talk about that, so we're excited about that. And the Pennridge Summer School at the high school, and you'll see the costs really haven't changed. So the only new addition is the theater camp. So we'll be able to come back and report on that, but this is what we have so far. It seems to continue to grow every year, which is a good thing for our students. Anybody have any questions about it?
I was just gonna say, I think it's great that we have more choices for the students.
It's growing rather than shrinking.
Yes, I think that's wonderful. And I had a question, I was just wondering, I saw there was an email sent looking for volunteers for Camp Invention. I was just wondering, oh, I guess she's gone. Do you know how many, if we've gotten a lot of volunteers?
I don't know the number, but I can find out.
Yeah, if we could just share that.
Absolutely.
I'm just interested to know if there are a lot of student volunteers for that.
Okay, I'll get that information. I'll fill that out. That's a wonderful camp, too.
So we ran that last year?
Yes,
This
really,
is
really.
the third? Because Sam
Yeah,
and
this-
Celine
this
did it,
will
it must be the
third.
third.
Yes, it will.
And it's great that the theater camp, I think we talked about it when they presented it, that price is really affordable for, it's half the price of what a week of drama camp is elsewhere, so actually less than half the price. So I'm glad to see that we have those kinds of things available. Thank you.
And all those camps are for middle school students, right?
Some are fourth, the summer string is fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth. And then the summer band is fifth and sixth, and then the musical theater doesn't start till sixth.
And camp invention is also, is that elementary and middle, or is it,
It's up to six.
oh, up to 6, okay.
And then the musical theater camp goes up to eighth, but graduating graders, incoming ninth can also
Okay.
participate.
Yeah, and, my always, just that, trying to find ways to encourage more students to attend summer school. We can just, I don't know, keep trying to think of ways to get kids in here. And I just wonder now do we have anything for the kids who don't come that would be, like, something they could do with, with the technology if they had a computer at home? Just wondering if there's something we can do for those kids who can't.
Who can't attend but should have, or just can't get there.
Right.
True.
So actually, we did talk about that. We don't get to send the devices home, so it would be for students who have devices at their home.
Well, right, I'm talking about elementary
Yes.
school kids, right, so, right, they don't have devices, but just, I don't know, just thinking of the next thing to do, because there are a number, we only get about 20%.
20% roughly. Yeah.
Right, so there's 80% who need some sort of extra help in the summer, right? And there's all that research that shows the summer slide with the 10 weeks. So I don't know if there's just something that could be like an outgrowth of the summer school using technology and making it just, and I'm sure there's something that we could create, almost like a little, almost like a little cyber class or something where just, activities that they could do would be like, this aligns with our curriculum, activity, and I know before they would send home packets, but maybe if they had it online, it would just be,
Fun, too.
right, it would be fun, it could be tracked, it would be, you turn something in, it could differentiate for the kids, right, as they reach one thing.
It's a really good idea, and we will explore it. But I do want to let you know that we've been working closely with the local library, and they've shared information with us, and we sent it out to students, and mostly it was through Title I meeting. But Karen Sterling has also gotten involved, and we're trying to get the word out to students to go to the local library, things like that too. That we don't want students to stop going to the library. But that's a wonderful point, and we'll start exploring that.
Okay.
It's a great idea. Thank you very much.
Any other comments, questions on this? Okay, thank you, and hopefully it will be successful this year. So that's the end of, I'm sorry?
As it be anticipated to be.
Yes.
Yeah, I had one question that
Okay.
I probably should have asked in technology, but it relates to curriculum, and I had brought up at a past meeting, I don't know if it was technology or curriculum, about students who take AP classes over the summer if they
Can you speak
get
up,
their
please?
computers. They could get their computers sooner because they have a lot of summer work to do.
We've been talking about that. That's why I'm shaking my
Yeah.
head.
Yes, that's why we're both shaking our head.
Yeah.
So we have been talking about that, and we're trying to put the vehicle in place to get them back into the students' hands sooner than later. There's a couple things that have to take place on the back end to allow us to do that, but we are definitely working on it. So whether it'll be, we're just not sure how it's going to look yet, and we're kicking around a couple different ways to do it, but we should be able to accommodate, so they at least have more time than they've had in the past.
Okay, that'd be great.
And then we'll get that word out to everybody so they know how to pick it up earlier, or whether we're just going to have them keep it. We're not, just not quite sure yet.
And I have one other follow-up question about the cyber SAT class. Is that going to be available or advertised to more students that they can take it in their opposite their health and phys ed?
Keep wanting to turn that.
I know, that's what we're trained now to hit the button and there's no.
So Mr. Lebowski assured me that that information was filtered down for guidance, so that's how it's being.
To rising 10th graders?
Yes.
And so do we have numbers, like, are there increased numbers now?
I don't know what the numbers are. I can check.
Okay.
Last I heard was what Kelly was telling me was communicating it, but I'll get the numbers.
Okay.
Can I ask, sorry, about, it's sort of on the SAT thing, but the PSATs, do we communicate to the students that if you take it in 10th grade, then you're eliminating your eligibility for the National Merit Scholarships? Do we tell them that? And should we?
know that.
Well, right, because we took it I took it when I was in 10th grade, and when the paper came home with my first two children in 10th grade, I was like, well, yes, of course, you'll take the PSAT, but I looked it up, I went and I confirmed it, because I'm not making the same mistake with Charlotte. But I went online and I looked, and it does say somewhere, at least the way I read it, that if you take it in 10th grade, then when you take it in 11th grade, you're not eligible, you're not going to be entered into the PSAT, and it doesn't count, I guess, in your 10th grade year. But if we could look into that
Yeah,
and really
we
make
are.
sure our students are taking it in the right year
That is
to be
a
eligible.
timely conversation, because that is a conversation that we've been having. And I sent out, email to all the districts locally to see, who's funding it, does everybody take it, is it mandatory, just to see what other districts are doing. But that's a really good point. And do we say, yes, I don't know that it's communicated to the degree, I think we could do better with that, but we really should be looking at PSATs.
I mean,
Sure, in
if
terms
someone
of-
can read it, and maybe I'm reading it incorrectly,
No,
but
you're
the
not
way I
reading it
read it
incorrectly.
was that they're not eligible then.
And we really are, that is something that I'm working with guidance and administration at the high school. I'm actually in the middle of trying to read the surveys that I got back.
Great, thank
Yep.
you.
Any other questions, comments from the board? If not, public comment. Mrs. Furlong?
Sue Furlong, West Rock Hill Township. It's really difficult to hear you all. It's like you're having a private conversation. I really would appreciate if you would speak up when we have microphone problems. I'm filming and, I'm not sure how you feel about that one way or the other, but as a courtesy, I would make that request. The other thing is I don't know if you're going to hand out that schedule and everything. I noticed that people are really truly getting their money's worth for the summer school, seeing that the class lasts from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. I think you need to serve dinner. But anyway, I would just make that one little typo adjustment there. But anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not? We're adjourned. Thank you for coming.